In this lesson, we will focus on evolutionary psychology. The idea behind this perspective is that many of our traits have evolved over time from our ancient ancestors. Traits that are most likely passed down will be those that enhance survival of a species in order to reproduce. Dominant traits will be passed along and weaker ones will die off. This is the principle behind evolutionary psychology, which is known as natural selection. British biologist Charles Darwin wrote a lot about evolution of animals. For example, giraffes at one time did not have such long necks. Lower vegetation was hard to obtain due to competition with other, more aggressive animals. So those with longer necks could reach higher food, so they survived and passed on that gene. Those with traits of a shorter neck had a lack of food, and those weaker genes died off. Thus, over years and years of breeding and evolving, we now have long-necked giraffes. Another example would be the peppered moth. Before the Industrial Revolution in England, most were light in color, as you can see on the right side of the picture. They would blend in with the tree, thus surviving. The darker ones stood out and were more likely to be eaten. After the Industrial Revolution and all the pollution remaining on the trees, that caused the dark moths to be camouflaged, so the white ones would then stand out and be easier prey. You can also apply evolutionary psychology to people. Most people, when asked, "What are your biggest fears?" will have the same answers worldwide. Spiders, snakes, and heights, for example, are usually among the top 10. These are dominant traits that have been passed along. Our ancestors who feared these survived and passed on those dominant genes to us. Those who were weak may have fallen off a cliff or touched a poisonous snake or spider, and those weaker genes died off. Many evolutionary psychologists would say that men worldwide are more aggressive than females because that trait has evolved over time. In ancient times, men had to protect the family, hunt for prey, or fight off predators. Those that were successful survived and passed on that gene. Those who were weak and could not protect or fight off their family would not have survived, and the weaker genes died off. Thus today, males are more aggressive than females in every culture around the world. Dmitry Belyaev conducted a research experiment in Russia. He wanted to see if he could create a domestic fox. He wanted to try and breed foxes so that he could have a fox that you could actually buy as a pet. He first took 40 males and 100 females. He had them mate. From their offspring, he took the tamest, and then he mated those. And then again, from their offspring, he would mate the tamest of those. Over about 40 years, he did create a fox that you could actually buy as a pet. Of course, this is not natural selection. This is artificial selection, where a person is tampering with the evolution of a particular trait. Take a few minutes and watch the video of Dmitry Belyav's experiment. If the video link does not work, you can Google Belyaev farm fox experiment. Thinking from an evolutionary perspective can sometimes be very dark and disturbing. I show a movie to my classes called Abandoned Ship. It's based on a true story. A luxury cruise ship hits a landmine and sinks very fast. They find out that no SOS has been sent, so no one really knows that the ship has gone down. Since the ship sunk so fast, only one lifeboat was actually spared, and those that survived who end up in the boat are overcrowding it. There's too many people in the boat, there's a lack of food, and they realize that they're going to have to row a couple weeks before they're going to approach land. The ship is taking on a lot of water because of too many occupants in the boat. The captain has to make a decision. As they are going into a storm, they realize if they all stay in the boat, they'll all perish because of the amount of rain that they're going to take on during the storm. So the captain has to decide whether or not he should send certain people overboard so that some can survive. This is really what evolutionary psychology is all about. Survival of the species, sometimes having to make a difficult decision. He wanted to keep the strong, who would be able to row and get all the way to Africa with very little food, which would have been 2 weeks away, putting the weaker ones over the side. I'd like you to take a minute, pause the video, and answer these 3 questions. I know they seem very disturbing, but I want you to think from an evolutionary perspective when you are selecting the answers. You need to think of what decision would you make to allow your species to survive and reproduce and carry on. So in the first question, you're on a boat that overturned, your 5-year-old and your 1-year-old are in the boat with you, neither of them can swim. Which one would you save? You have to think which one of them would have the best chance of survival. So you would want to pick the 5-year-old. The 5-year-old has already went through a period where young children are more susceptible to childhood illnesses and injury. They survive that time period, so their chances of growing older and surviving would be greater. The next question, in the boat, you have a 40-year-old and a 20-year-old. Neither of them can swim, so you're like 60, and you've not taught either of your children how to swim. But here, you're obviously going to take the 20-year-old. The 20-year-old has a better chance of reproducing, and that's what you want in order for your species to survive. So you would choose the 20-year-old here. Which will elicit more grief, the death of a son or the death of a daughter? Here, you would choose the death of a son, because a male can actually reproduce their entire life, whereas a woman would not be able to, 1, when they are carrying a child, and 2, after they go through menopause. So males are more fertile, so they would elicit more grief. The death of an unhealthy child or a healthy child, you would obviously mourn the death of a healthy child because they had a stronger chance of reproducing and surviving and carrying on the species. Again, I would like you to pause the video for just a minute and answer these 2 questions, but not from an evolutionary perspective. I would like you to answer them from your very own perspective. Men and women tend to answer these questions very differently. Who would you rather marry, someone older or someone younger? Most males choose someone younger, and most females choose someone older. Most males will choose someone younger because they are more fertile. Therefore, the species has a better chance of carrying on and surviving. Women tend to choose someone older, someone who is more mature and a better candidate to help support or take care of her. And these 2 traits have been bred in us according to evolutionary psychology. Men were all about reproducing and repopulating, we're more distant, and women were the nurturers and taking care of the children and the home and needing that mature person to help support them. In the next question, most women will choose financial prospects, caring and responsible, or ambition and industriousness. And this, again, is bred in females wanting that support, someone to help take care of them. Good looks and physical attractiveness tends to be what males will pick. Again, men are looking at younger, more attractive females because they're geared for reproducing. It would not make sense for men to be attracted to older women. If young men were attracted to older women like Betty White, the human race would cease to exist because older women cannot reproduce. Therefore, it's bred in men to look for younger, more fertile qualities in women that are desirable. Research shows that these mating or dating preferences are true for every culture around the world. Men in every culture prefer more attractive, physical, youthful, and healthy features in a female mate, where women prefer maturity, social status, and resources in their mate. So if men are all about reproducing and women are more relationship oriented, psychologists pose the question, would men and women differ in their attitudes towards casual sex with a stranger? Several experiments were conducted, one at Florida State and one at Dartmouth College, where they had female students walk up to random male students and ask them if they would sleep with them tonight. And then certain males walked up to different female students on campus and said the same thing. I think you're really good looking. Would you sleep with me tonight? In all of the experiments that were conducted, they found that 3 out of 4, or 75% of all men who were asked, agreed to sleep with a stranger that they had never met before. On the other hand, no women would agree. So therefore, they found that there is a fundamental difference in one's attitude to casual sex with a stranger in regards to gender.